Hi, my name is Daisy Woods, and today I will be presenting a professional development series entitled Understanding Students with ADHD. How many students with ADHD are currently being served in the United States? A 2016 National Survey for Children's Health reported that 5.7 million students school-aged had been diagnosed in their lifetime. Of those, 2.4 million were children ages 6 to 11, and the remaining 3.3 million were adolescents aged 12 to 17. And of those, 5.1 had a current diagnosis of ADHD. And I would like to share some treatment statistics associated with a current diagnosis. 2 out of 3 students take medication for their disorder. Less than half have received a behavioral treatment, and nearly 1 in 3 use a combination of medication and behavioral therapies to treat their disorder, but nearly 1 in 4 students receives no treatment for their ADHD. And how has the number of students identified increased in recent years, and what are the reported reasons for that increase? First of all, I have found that there has been an approximate 30% increase in the diagnosis since the late 1990s. And part of that is because there wasn't a whole lot of information before 1997. The first national survey for parents questioning about their kids' diagnosis of ADHD was done in 1997. And the increase could be reflected upon students who have ADHD, or it could also reflect just those that are being diagnosed. And it is a really blurred line and basically impossible to tell which scenario is true. The way ADHD is diagnosed has changed over time. So that difference in numbers could be related to the way our diagnostic criteria has changed. And some believe that the approval rating of FDA drugs for treatment of ADHD has increased since the late 1990s, and some relate that to pharmaceutical sales increases. So what are the specific behaviors and characteristics of a student with ADHD? The first of 3 subtypes is the predominantly inattentive ADHD. And those students have a hard time paying attention to detail, and they often make careless mistakes. They have a hard time paying attention in academic and social activities. You know, a young kid that's on a soccer team may have a hard time listening to his soccer coach. It's not just in the classroom. And these students have a hard time listening when spoken to. Following directions and staying on task is difficult. They have a hard time organizing their responsibilities. Maintaining their mental effort throughout the day is hard. 8:30 to 3:30 is a very long day for a student with ADHD. Keeping track of their supplies is difficult, and avoiding distractions. They're the student that is looking to see who's walked in the door, or watching so-and-so go up to the Kleenex box to get a Kleenex. They are very prone to distractions in the classroom. And these students have a hard time remembering their daily activities. In order to be diagnosed with this predominantly inattentive type, a student would need to have characteristics of 6 or more of these traits on a continual basis. These students display a slow approach in their academic endeavors. They often look bored and unmotivated in the classroom, and they are the students that are self-conscious. And unlike the other 2 types, predominantly inattentive ADHD has a higher ratio of girls to boys. And this could be correlated to the anxiety and mood disorders that are prone to this type of ADHD. And these students' biggest hurdle will be their academic achievement. The second subtype is the predominantly hyperactive impulsive ADHD, and these students have a hard time keeping their hands and feet still and to themselves. They have a hard time staying still in their seat. They're the wiggle worms. And they have a hard time staying seated in general. They are the students who are running and jumping and climbing when it's inappropriate to do so. They have a hard time settling into quiet activities. They are always on the go and have a hard time resisting that natural response. They are the students who are the blurters in the classroom. They raise their hand and they're the ooh, 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 me students. They have a hard time waiting their turn. They are quick to want to rush to the front of the line. They interrupt others. And in this predominantly hyperactive, impulsive ADHD, those symptoms will generally begin in preschool and may level off into the combined type as they grow older, which I will discuss in the next slide. These students are fidgety and constantly in motion. That hyperactivity may decrease with age, but that impulsivity will carry on with them throughout their adult life. Let's see. The third type, the final type, is the combined type, and it is the most common form of ADHD. And students will demonstrate qualities of both inattentive and hyperactivity, impulsivity. And they will display any combination of the traits listed on the previous two slides. These students will face academic challenges as well as social difficulties, and they have an increased prevalence of internalizing behaviors such as withdrawal, anxiety, depression, as well as their externalizing behaviors of acting out and aggression. How is it difficult in the classroom for students to learn with ADHD? Those internalizing behaviors and externalizing behaviors can isolate a peer or isolate a student from their peers. A student who's angry and acting out generally tends to isolate himself and make it difficult for himself to have friends. The delinquent behaviors associated in adolescence become problematic with attendance. They have difficulties completing assignments, and that in turn reflects poor grades. Their working memory challenges are associated with reading achievement difficulties. They have their lack of planning and organizing skills make their daily work problematic. And their inability to focus results in not knowing the details of the assignment. They're not auditory learners, so a lot of times when the teacher's teaching the lesson, they're not listening, and so when the paper is passed out, they have a hard time knowing what they're even supposed to do. Do all students demonstrate the same characteristics or degree of behavior? Short answer, no. Every child demonstrates their own unique variation of the disorder, and those symptoms kind of exist on a spectrum from small, detailed characteristics to the most prevalent, and they vary in type and severity, and where that student falls on the spectrum kind of determines how we can best help them, whether it's IEPs, 504s, medication regimens, behavioral therapies, organizational coaches. Those are all supplementive treatments. Under IDEA 2004, students with ADHD are categorized under the other health impairments category, and they display limited strength, vitality, and alertness. And that includes alertness in the environmental stimuli within the educational setting. This could be due to a chronic or acute health problems. Asthma, diabetes, epilepsy are all reflective of those other health impairments. And ADHD represents 2/3 of that category. So what are some effective class-wide interventions that can benefit all students, especially those with ADHD? Transitioning, we can have enough time from one activity to come down to starting another. teaching organizational techniques that organize a student's thoughts and materials, offering flexible time limits for finishing assignments and tests, and abilities to simplify multi-step tasks, taking breaks and breaking up the assignments, creating assignments that allow students to move about the classroom or even stand without being a learning distraction. This slide I have chosen shows some of the resources that I have used for materials gathered to share with you today. And I would like to thank you all for joining me, and I hope that you have taken something away from this. And I've left with a quote that says, "Every student can learn, just not on the same day or the same way." And I would like to encourage all of you to remember, when dealing with a student with ADHD, sometimes it can be difficult because they are the blurters, and they can test your patience. But it's important to remember that on those bad days, or those days when they've run out of their medication, that this is a disorder. It is in their chemical makeup in their brain, and the way that they're acting is not a reflection of them, but a reflection of their disorder. And it is our job as educators to do our best in supplementing success in these children's learning environment. So thank you all for joining me today.